It's a crazy time because I had 5 boys, and sometimes they would all have softball, or they'd all have soccer games at the same time, and you're like, okay, whose game do I go to? Sometimes if I could tell when I was a young mom, if I could give myself advice, first of all, I'd be like, don't be so hard on yourself. If you're 5 minutes late to one of the games, so be it. Because sometimes I would try to just run everywhere, and by the end of the day, you were just like, oh my heavens. Also, get help. Find some neighbors or friends and be like, hey, can you carpool here? And I'll take this kid here if you can take that one there. If you have that kind of a neighborhood that there's other kids around. Probably one of the biggest things I learned with my first child, I signed him up for everything. He was going to be so well-rounded. I mean, he was going to know everything. He was going to play ball. He was going to do music. He was going to, And so this poor child, we had him running around like a puppet. And with my youngest child, I let him choose. It was like, hey, you get to do a sport this season. Which one do you want to do? And then he can say, I don't really want to play baseball, but I'd really like to do soccer, or I'd like to do basketball. And then he chose, and it made my life so much easier. And it was more pleasant for him too. My oldest child, we signed him up for this basketball team. And frankly, I mean, he was the band major. He was so talented in so many things, but basketball wasn't his talent, even though he was taller than the other kids. And so he was signed up on this basketball team, and for 5 years, they did not win one game. And we were talking about this the other day, and he was like, Mom, that was the most miserable thing, but I always thought that you never wanted me to be a quitter. And I'm like, well, yeah, but I wish you would have at least told me that, hey, I don't really love this basketball. I don't really want to do this. So, yeah, my younger kids, they get to pick more. But it's important for your kids to have something to do, too. I think it's really important that they have something that they do. I love that. And I love that my kids have all done something different so that they're not as competitive with each other. If you have a bunch of siblings, sometimes they'll be so competitive on the same thing if they don't have their own thing that they choose that they like to do. And once I figured that out, that made my life so much easier. The other thing is, as soon as they turn 15, here in Utah, as soon as you're 15, you could start to get your driver's license and learn how to drive. As soon as my kids could learn how to drive, we went and got a driver's license, and they learned how to drive, and that made my life wonderful. And it's good for them, too. Some of these parents are like, well, I don't want to pay insurance, but what a great time to teach them how to drive. If they'll learn to drive in your home on your cars, a lot safer that way, even though you get a few of those calls of fender denders and whatever else, but at least you're like, have a little bit more help in teaching them those skills. Well, our family is very interesting because we have 5 boys and my husband, and they're all very much, they like to be in charge. Each one of them is a very, I want to be the boss. And that's sometimes really healthy, but it could have been a real problem. How did I handle that? I think life is, I hear it said all the time that life is a classroom. And I think it's good for them to have those siblings that they have to learn how to, and sometimes letting them figure it out. If they were fighting, with a video game, I'd be like, okay, well, the video game goes in timeout. So I would take the video console and hide it. And then they had to figure it out and learn how to get along. And I'd always be like, now, do you really want Mom to get involved? Oh, no. Because as soon as Mom got involved, then all the fun stopped. But, once they got to, it's important for them to learn how to resolve conflict. Our whole life, all of us need to learn how to resolve conflict. And if they can do it as kids, it's so powerful because then they'll know how to have those critical conversations. They'll know how to deal with it. And you learn obviously, if they're going to hurt each other, if they come in trying to swat each other with something, then you intervene. But half the time, they figure it out much better than I ever would. I want to be aware of what's going on, but not micromanaging it.